on to keep out from WWFK, and finally, Amin and Jai from Oxfam, Senegal. Thank you.
Thanks, Hunter. Hi, everyone. One of the greatest ironies in the negotiation here is the critically important gigaton gap. This is the difference between the mitigation pledges in the Copenhagen Accord and what's scientifically necessary to limit warming to no more than 2 or 1.5 degrees C are not actually under negotiation or in any of the texts being discussed here in Cancun. While everyone understands that the countries aren't likely to close the gigaton gap here in Cancun, even though they should, there's also an understanding that countries will do more in the future. And yet the negotiators are working on an agreement that doesn't set up a process to close the gigaton gap. Because the gap needs to be closed soon, this is setting us up for unacceptable delay. In sum, the Copenhagen Accord pledges are woefully insufficient to meet the stated goal of the Accord, which is to limit warming to under 2 degrees C. It's also particularly important because 2 degrees itself is not safe. It's actually the dividing line between dangerous climate change and catastrophic climate change. So how big is the gap? The gap is between about 5 and 9 gigatons of greenhouse emissions. To give you a size of how big that is, 5 gigatons is about the total amount of emissions from all of the world's cars, trucks, and buses for a year. 7 gigatons is about the size of the annual emissions of the United States. The gap is expressed as a range because the size of the gap depends on a couple of things. First, whether we're talking about the conditional or unconditional mitigation pledges from Copenhagen. A lot of countries gave 2 numbers. They gave a higher number, which is conditioned on something else happening, mitigation action from other countries or finance, for example, and then a lower number, which is unconditional. The other thing that the gap depends on is the status of existing loopholes, and in particular, what happens to the logging loopholes under discussion here, whether those loopholes are closed or whether they're actually widened further. And also, whether surplus emissions trading credits, known as hot air, whether those credits are allowed to be carried forward. And these are 2 very important areas to watch over the next week, and we have cause for real concern based on what we've seen so far. So fundamentally, the first thing we need to see happen in Copenhagen is that nothing that happens here digs us further, deeper into the hole that we're already in by failing to close or actually widening existing loopholes. Second, we need to see out of Copenhagen a formal acknowledgement of the gigaton gap and to see a process being set up to close it. And I believe this is one of the things that Keith is going to address next. Thanks very much.